that ended up being my biggest advantage and like really setting me apart. I think I have a very different approach to how I create, and it is because I don't have that preconceived idea of how it had to be done.
Yeah. Hi everyone, this is Alex York. I'm an associate editor at Forbes on the 30 Under 30 team, and I am here with a 30 Under 30 lister, Kate Barton. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So we have a lot to talk about. I know that you had no really intentions of going down the fashion route.
Yeah, so like growing up, I guess I never explored my creative side. Like no one in my family was creative, and like I didn't know I didn't even try to do that route, and so it was never something I even like thought in the realm of possibilities.
Right.
And when I got to school and college, I kind of started realizing like I like style and fashion, and but I was like I could never be a fashion designer. Like that's not even an option. So I started getting into more of like the merchandising side of it, and I was into it, but I was like not fully there. Like something was missing.
Do you think that, because you said, you're from Kansas City, being from the Midwest, I'm also from the Midwest,
Yeah.
and I feel like growing up too, I also never thought that many creative fields were even an option. Like I didn't know people who did it. Is that something that kind of came?
I guess, and it's something that I'm realizing like now.
Yeah.
I think like being in Kansas, it's not like you're around these careers in like media and like fashion design. And so I think it's just something that seems like a far dream that you could aspire to, but not something that's like realistic.
And I feel like there's such a stereotype of like what a fashion designer is.
Yes.
Did you feel like you did not embody that growing up, or
so
how did you
it was
see yourself
actually
being?
when I got to I kind of jumping ahead, but when I got to grad school for fashion design and I had no experience going into that, that's when I felt like I do not fit the mold of what a fashion designer typically looks like, or kind of
What did you think that mold was that you were not fitting into?
I felt like everyone, I guess it was like more of a stereotype. I always thought like everyone has to be so into their like creative side and like
a little
sketch
eccentric,
and like sketch on their free time. And I was just like, I like to socialize with friends, and I didn't realize that I also had that side to me, and it came across differently. I used to see like Instagrams that would be like very aesthetic, and I was like, I could never do that.
Right.
And I was like, I guess this isn't for me.
Yeah.
But I realized that it's not always like, it doesn't have to always be that way.
How would you describe yourself then?
Now?
Yeah. And when you were younger, like when
It's
you were like
funny.
finding this
I
out.
think it's funny because I think I'm learning about myself in the last few years, and I've come to my team always gets mad at me because I'm like, I'm not creative, and they're like, yeah, you are. I think I now have come to really understand my strengths and like how I would describe myself. I do think having this kind of practical mindset and almost like a business side to my creative abilities has been a big advantage with starting a brand and being able to kind of leverage both sides of creative and building a business.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I know we're kind of getting into talking about
we're
building the brand
kind
now,
of,
but let's like back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like you said, this was not something that you kind of, sought after for a long time, but I know in a video that you just recently made for Instagram, you talked about like really needing to find your individuality being a triplet. Can you walk me through that a little bit? I feel like that's such a like universal feeling when you're younger.
Yeah, so like growing up a triplet, and I again didn't realize this at the time, but you're obviously grouped together as, triplets. And so I think I was always we all were trying to find our individuality and kind of what set us apart and what we could be defined by other than one of the triplets. And so I think I was always trying to figure that out. We all did different like hobbies and sports and in high school and stuff, and we all intentionally went to separate colleges for that reason. I think I was like really wanting to go off on my own and like have my own kind of voice and space. And I think that's when I really started discovering like my actual interests and what I was capable of too, and what I was passionate about.
Did you feel like growing up, and especially then like when you were kind of finding your niche in the fashion space, encouraged to go like the brand building route? Were you, going to go down like a different line at first?
When I got into fashion?
Yeah.
No, I definitely was not going to start a brand.
Okay.
So a little background, I guess I can try to make it summarized, but I didn't know I could do fashion design. I really wanted to try though. So I did an internship in New York, and like lied on the resume and said I'm in school for fashion design. So I went to New York, did this internship, absolutely loved it. The first day they were like, go in the back and sew this. I think it was like a test. And so I just YouTubed it. And
you didn't know how to sew?
No.
Okay.
And I realized every day when they would give me a new task, I was like, I can do this. It really is just like about learning and like problem solving. And once I realized that, I was like, yeah, give me more tasks. It was such a pivotal moment for me because I was like, I can do this. And I think that's also something I try to get across to people, because I think if people are like, I can't do this, or it's too late to start this, it's like, it really isn't. And I think if you are passionate about something and like want it enough, you really can figure it out. And so after that internship, I was like, I would love to like work for a bigger brand. And I knew I had to go to school if I wanted to get those jobs. And so I looked and found like a short program at SCAD, which was their grad school program. So I went there. First day, again, I'm like hoping to just like learn the basics so that I can go get a job. And it's grad school. So they're like, you should already have 4 years of background. We're not teaching you anything. You're making collections and building your like
Because probably
aesthetic.
Most people in your cohort had that experience,
And they were all coming from like Central St. Martin's, and like I didn't even know what that was at the time. I was like, I am out of place. And that's when I was telling you, I was like, I don't think I fit here.
Right.
And it actually was my biggest advantage not having the background, because the first day the professor was like, bring a fabric manipulation to class. So I like Googled it and took the term literally, brought this like crazy piece of fabric that I manipulated, and everyone else had like a top stitch or a ruffle or like something regular. And I was like, oh, I did this wrong. And she was like, this is really interesting, and was like really encouraging for me to keep building on these things I'm discovering. And that ended up being my biggest advantage and like really setting me apart. I think I have a very different approach to how I create, and it is because I don't have that preconceived idea of how it had to be done.
Yeah.
So then after school, I would kind of have this approach and was really able to like discover and build my core aesthetic in grad school over those 2 years. It was also COVID, so then we were all at home. And it really like made me not rely on anyone though. Like I was like, I'm doing this myself and figured it out myself.
Right.
Like so I think I had more confidence than maybe if you're in school and getting help from a professor. And so after school, I was just planning to move to New York and get a job. And I got up for this award in Milan. And it was like for like emerging designers right out of school. And so it was like 30 emerging designers all over the world. And
had you created a collection yet, or was it?
Yeah, so in grad school, all we did was create collections. Okay. And so I, like, from day one was, like, creating a collection and had to figure out what that meant for me and how that worked. And I think not having so much pressure of, like, years of thinking about when I would have to do that, I think it just kind of, like, let go of all the pressure. And I was like, I just was doing something very organically. Right. A common reoccurrence is, like, everything since starting the brand and even before has been very organic and like been a natural progression. So I like to like keep it going that way and not feel like forced in a way. So yeah, and then I went to Milan, did this little show for emerging designers, and it was put on by the Milan Fashion Week, and I just thought it was cool to be there. I was the only American, and it was all in Italian. Like, it was for Italian designers to, like, start a brand. Right. And during the awards, they give out, like, one main innovation prize that you then, like, they expect you to kind of go use that support to start a brand. And is it financial? Financial and just, like, mentorships and also a lot of exposure at that stage. And it was in Italian, so I was just, like, listening along, but I actually became the first American to win that prize, and I was really grateful for the support and also kind of like, oh, I guess I have to start a brand now.
Did you feel like a pressure to do that? Was it excitement, or what was going through your mind?
So I knew, and I got feedback from a lot of people like that were really supporting and were like, you should do it. And I knew that if it was kind of like, you can go work for someone for a few years and then do it, but are you gonna be comfortable getting out and doing that after? Like, you should use right now while you have the momentum and do it. And I knew, I was like, if I go get a job, I'm not gonna do this.
Right.
It
was like siloed in, and then that's the routine. And
and then it's like you see how hard it actually is once you're there, and I definitely wouldn't have. But yeah, I think I just was like, okay, I'll go for it. And I had no idea how to start a brand. Like, I hadn't worked for anyone. Right. So I didn't see all the steps that went into it.
Do you think that because I talk about this with young founders a lot, the, importance sometimes of like having worked for someone and seeing how like they've built their company and what it's like to manage a team and like just organize on a day-to-day basis versus coming in with like new innovative ideas and just like building from the ground up based on nothing in a lot of cases. What were your thoughts on like the benefits or maybe the, difficulties of that?
Yeah, I see benefits to both, honestly. I think like the one thing about everyone is so different, especially in this creative field of like the fashion industry, and every brand grows differently. It's not like a model that you can follow, and that's something that I think can maybe dishearten people that maybe have worked for someone and try to do it in that same way and it doesn't work. So I think, again, my not knowing and going into it like just organically has been the biggest advantage for me and how I built this fairly fast. Because I didn't know that these things usually took years. Right. Like, I just kind of was like, okay, well, let's do this now.
And you officially launched in 2022, correct? Yes. What were, like, your first steps to launching, like, on a practical level?
Yeah, so the first step in general was, like, I need to make a collection and also, like, build out kind of, like, learn the industry and, like, kind of see where I can produce clothes, how I can create stuff, and who I work best with. So I worked with like local sample makers and kind of started building out my first collection because I knew that that was obviously the entry point in. Right. And I had started with a PR team at the time, and at the time I really didn't even know what that meant. And they were like, you should apply for the CFDA like official Fashion Week calendar. And typically I think they like to see your brand like a few times before they kind of let you in because they want to make sure it's like stable enough to be consistent on the calendar. And so I applied thinking like I'm not getting in yet, so I don't need to prepare. And they tell you a month before if you're on the calendar. And so I remember that's kind of the official launch because I started the brand, and then like 2 months later I find out I'm on the Fashion Week calendar, and everyone was like pretty surprised by it.
Was it like a scramble to get ready then?
Yeah, it was 1 month. But after that I was like, oh, I can do everything in 1 month. Like I did this. And so it was a scramble, but I really think like we brought in a lot of great like industry people and editors, and everyone showed up, and it was at this very like quaint like loft, and it wasn't anything crazy, and I think everyone really appreciated the like trueness to it and just like where I was at the time. And I was very honest about like I just started the brand. Like I remember buyers came and I was like, I'm not even ready for that yet. Like appreciate you coming, but yeah, I think that was like a great first step of really showing like who I was as a brand and like where I was hoping to head with it. And from there, it was just like nonstop.
What types of garments did you show in that very first show?
So it's actually interesting. When I started the brand, I had a very intentional approach. And I think this is also kind of how we've scaled it fast. I started out with a very editorial, like exaggerated version of what the brand really is. And I have these core techniques that I created and actually are now patented. And it's like these draping and sculpting processes that are just true to me. And I think with those, I really went to the extreme with them, not only to get attention, but just so that people really understood, like, this is the Kate Barton brand DNA. This is what we're building. So then when I do something like smaller, like a brooch or a drape, it's like reminiscent of what our DNA is. And so I started with that and was really like evening wear, and I got it was great to get like placements on red carpets and exposure with viral posts on social media. And so unintentionally it was really like strategic way of starting out, and I think from there we've really built into full collection. And I think the slow build out of the same techniques was important.
Do you think that showing at fashion weeks is worth it? Because I feel like designers have very different opinions on like, is it worth the cost of it? Is it worth like, you know,
the question everyone asks. Yeah. We all ask ourselves this too. There's definitely, I mean, it's, again, every business is different. What's helpful for one is not helpful for another. So it really just depends, like, who is your customer, who you're trying to target, and what do you want out of this. Luckily, like, with sponsorship and amazing partners, we are able to do shows, and to do that without like losing sight of the business. So I think it just comes to like what works at that time.
Yeah.
And like, for example, for this upcoming season in February, we're actually doing something a little different. It's on the calendar, but it's a little bit more of a campaign. And I just felt like this would resonate better with our customer and audience right now. So I'm really excited about that.
Who is your target customer today?
I really like think a lot on this question. I don't like to limit myself to one answer. I think we have this luxury brand, but also being younger and being able to kind of relate to the Gen Z customer and being able to like really bring in and understand how social media works and the power of like building on social media and buying power on social media, I think has been a big impact for us. And so I'm kind of like leaning into that and just building out the brand with that in mind.
How do you think social media does impact you today? I mean,
So,
it's obviously a huge driver of a lot of things.
I think it's interesting because I'm really grateful for it, because I think starting a brand like even 10 years ago, I think it just like you had to be patient and wait your turn.
Right.
And now it's like if you come in, and I think just through getting attention on social media and getting kind of a loyal customer base and support really helped us grow within the industry as well, because it kind of let them see what we were doing. And
are most of your customers like from social media, or is that just a way to build brand awareness? Like, what does it like tangibly give you in return?
Yeah,
almost?
I mean, we see a lot of return on stuff, and I would say that is a big, for D2C, that's a big part of our customer base, is through our social media and our posting and stuff. However, on the other end, it's like luxury retailers and stores, which is another great customer base.
And in addition to those like consumer products that you have, you also, like you said, have been seen on the red carpet in shows like Emily in Paris, which I am rewatching right now for like the third or fourth time for like a comfort show. Can you walk me through what those experiences are like?
Yeah, it's so funny how they happen. Everyone always is like, do you just like reach out to these people every day? And it's such a small world once you're in it. Once you're in the fashion industry, in that world, everyone knows everyone. Like all the stylists are very up to date on who the emerging designers are, and the editors, and everyone is, it's like this small community once you're in it. And so we just like kind of, the stylists are very supportive of the emerging brands, and like if they like my work, they'll reach out, and we'll usually just do a call and then see how best to work on whatever the project is. I love working on stuff that's a little more customized, like Emily in Paris. I actually love that show, so I was excited when we got the call.
It's such a comfort show.
And it's such like a fun fashion show too. And so yeah, it's funny because these things like happen over a span of like a year, because obviously the show is filmed, and so by the time it happens, I'm like, that was a while ago. But it's always really exciting. We're actually working with a new show right now too that's really exciting. So I think like I love those opportunities. It's so fun for me because it's cool to see it in a different world too.
And so oftentimes those are customized pieces that they'll call you and tell you like, this is basically what we need, or how do those conversations look?
It always is a little different. And even for red carpets, especially if I know the person and it's more of a collaborative experience, it's really up to like what either the costume director or like celebrity on a red carpet is wanting. Usually they will pull from like styles they like of ours or certain elements they like, and then we'll see how best to make it customized to whoever is wearing it.
Okay. And for emerging designers right now, or people who are really just coming up in this industry and want like exposure in those sorts of ways, what are pieces of advice that you have for them?
I think like honestly, relationships are a big one, and I am not like, I'm not saying it's easy. I moved here and did not know a single person. Like I did not know anyone, and so I didn't have these relationships starting out. I think I just don't be afraid to reach out and put yourself out there. I think like I DM'd or cold emailed like so many people who to this day didn't respond, but like some did. And those some that did then connect you with someone else, and it's just then you're really building relationships, and then it gets to a point where that's just how the cycle is. And I think people are much more willing to support someone that like they really see is out there trying and putting themselves out there. I also think obviously social media is a huge platform, and even reaching out to people you would want to dress and just asking them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like people need to be in a place like New York to start fostering this community, or how do you see, because I know like, for instance, like the LA fashion scene is like very different, but also like very emerging, and there are a lot of young designers there. What are your thoughts on like geographically?
I think it depends what you're doing with a fashion brand. For me, starting out in a more luxury space, I do feel like New York was the best option for me. If it's a more ready-to-wear brand, like those thrive very well in LA. And I guess now even with social media, it can just be an online business. It really depends what you're looking for. I think for me, it was also about building these relationships and within the industry, and a lot of those people are here. But yeah, it's definitely a lot different now with being able to have relationships with people in Europe too, just through online.
How do you position yourself in that like space where there are so many brands that are constantly popping up? How do you make yourself different to kind of foster those relationships and that support?
I think it first comes to, in my opinion, like what you're doing. And I think we have this very different approach to creating, and almost this like illusion of what we're doing, and it's really different than what you see. Like we have all these chrome pieces that everyone thinks they're like 3D printed metal, and they're really sculpting leather, and it's lightweight and wearable. And so I think starting those conversations and having people like intrigued about it and coming to your page to be like, what is this? Starts building like more of a conversation around the brand instead of just like pretty clothes. And I think that conversation then builds into more interest from other industry people as well.
Yeah. What is your creative process, especially when you are trying to, create something that is different from what you've seen out there?
My creative process is very hands-on. Like in the beginning it was a very experimental approach. And so it never starts with like a sketch or an idea. It's really about like hands-on draping and sculpting the fabric. And at this point now we kind of have like a process to that and core silhouettes that we build off of, but it's really about intuition and like organically building it.
Do you think had that first like class assignment been create a sketch versus a fabric manipulation, you would have had a different like approach to designing?
There was actually another class that we were doing sketching, and they were like, I don't think you should be here. Like they were like, you're not getting it. So yeah, I do think that professor of mine was very pivotal in my growth.
And you said too that you have some patented like techniques now, and that came from that first class, correct? Can you like explain why that was something you even wanted to do in the first place, to patent is it like a design or is it a technique, or
it's
what
a technique.
exactly? Okay.
It's a draping technique, and draping from the inside of the fabric.
Okay.
So it's a different way of doing it, and it looks crazy if you know how to drape. It's like, what are you doing? But it's like a minimal waste approach, and it's able to create voluminous shape without excess material or waste. And so I think once I kind of discovered that, it was important for me to build on it. And at that stage, so many people were like, this is really so different than what we've seen out there. And so I decided to talk to a patent attorney, and this process started there.
Yeah, and I think that's like totally goes back to what you were saying about like coming into the industry and not knowing like what the norms are, and then also therefore not knowing like that you were doing something that
I didn't
had not
know
really
it was
been
that
seen.
different.
Yeah, and then so from there, then how did you? And because you said that you kind of still do this, how do you go about building on these either techniques that you're creating or like the collections that you create one after another?
Yeah, it's again a really organic process. Now it's kind of like a mix of business and creative, and I think that's one of the most challenging parts of starting a brand is like being able to maintain the brand DNA so strongly while scaling a business more commercially. And it's something that I put a lot of time into to make sure we're doing it smart and like in both ways and not losing the uniqueness to it. And so I think every season's a little bit different in terms of like what our customer has been interested in or what we see works. But it's always building off of my core techniques.
Yeah. Industry insights wise, what are you seeing consumers flock towards right now versus like, maybe these other kind of events or things like that you're working on?
Yeah, I think people are less interested in like the name of the brand now and more interested in like what you're doing and how you're doing it. And so I think we just try to like kind of maintain like our relevance with our consumer, and also like just being in my 20s, it's like doing things that I think sell. Like I kind of see like what I gravitate towards, and I'm like, we should do this for the brand. So it's very, again, organic. It's just like kind of figuring out what works best for our customer. I think also like this goldfish bag has been like such a key part in building our customer, because it's so universally loved, and it's not something that you have to be like into fashion to like or find funny. And it's really grown our brand on like a large scale of like from the red carpets to Jimmy Fallon to like all these people buy it off the website, like big people, and I like have to ship it to their. I'm like, you could have just asked me for it.
Don't tell them that. Let them buy it.
I know.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that too, because in terms of like building a brand today, I feel like so much about it is like either hitting a viral moment on social media, or like building some sort of like iconic product that you can then be like known for in a sense. How do you go about creating that? Do you know it's gonna hit when you're creating it?
Yeah, so I mean, now I'm like, that was smart. I did that. I did not do it for any reason. I did it as a joke in grad school. I thought it was funny, and it just got so much attention even while I was in school. And so it was actually the first thing I produced when I started the brand. I was like, I'll try out production. So I produced it, and I still don't have any marketing. It's all like organic marketing, and it like sells out all the time. And now we're producing it on a larger scale, and it's something that like I just think like resonates with everyone, and it's such a conversation starter. I mean, if you bring it out, it's like crazy how many people come up to you.
I think you're right though, like having a conversation starter is such a great way to build brand awareness, like, you know, for yourself, like if someone is coming up to you, that's interesting what you're wearing or what you have or whatever, but also for you as a brand to be known for something like this. Do you have any like plans in terms of like the future and what you're building towards? Is it gonna be like more accessories? Are you going, you know, diving deeper into these techniques? Like what is next for Kate Barton? What are you building on?
We're actually expanding more into even more into ready to wear and accessories. I wanted things that like I want to wear every day. I want things that really are more accessible, and so that's kind of what we're doing this upcoming season that will launch in February. So I'm really excited about that and how it's built out from our initial evening wear into now. And with that, we're doing more accessories and like still building upon the accessories we have, just because I think I would love to continue down that route as well.
Yeah. Are there any designers that you're particularly looking out for right now, or getting inspiration from, or just look up to?
Someone I really look up to, and I met them a few months ago, and they were just as amazing as I expected them to be, is Simon Jacquemus. I'm sure everyone says that, but he is so smart with his marketing and how he like can connect with his consumers and do it in such a like playful, like not so serious way. I like to like not be so serious with it, and so I think I really look up to him and how he's built his business.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you think that there's anything after having a couple years now like behind you that you would tell your younger self, one like the girl in Kansas City, but also like the Kate that was just like beginning to embark on fashion that you wish that you knew then?
I think everything I've had to learn myself is important. Like I think having the challenges and making the mistakes is important, because then you really understand where to go from there and how to pivot the next time. So I don't think there's anything I would have changed. I think now I really have the mindset of like having more fun with it and not being so worried about, I guess, the timeline of things. I think in the beginning it was like, okay, get into stores, do this, and this timeline that is made up. And I think things happen that weren't in that way, but even better opportunities that I would have never even thought of. So I think it's just like now not putting so much pressure on a timeline.
Yeah. Do you have any goals for the next like couple of years that you have set out for yourself though?
Yeah, I mean, I think just scaling the business. I think we've really established our business in the industry now, and so now it's really about scaling and focusing on the business side.
Definitely. The last question I have for you is, you talked about, and you kind of mentioned it there too and earlier, the walking the line of like being creative and building like a creative brand and brand identity, but also being a business that is a functioning business, bringing in money. What is your best piece of advice for how to find that line for, you know, whether it's someone in the fashion industry or like any sort of product-based business today?
I mean, I'm still learning, but I think focusing on a business and also building out your team around you to help with that. Right now, that's kind of our next goal, is like hiring that business person. And I think that will also really help with me being able to focus more on the creative, because I think the creative is what makes a brand so unique in any product, whatever it is. And so it's like just as important to stay true to that and not lose sight of it just because it's scaling or becoming more commercial. So I think building out a team around you that you trust and like can support to help you grow.
Yeah, definitely. So it's the community in the industry, but also within the brand
within
itself.
The business. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was super fun to talk about all you're building. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I had fun.